Madeleine
How did,
Longoria Garcia, we are live.
Hi. Hello.
Hi, it's good to have you.
Yeah, good to see you and chat with you.
You are fresh back from Kansas City,
Yes,
US
I
Coffee
am.
Champs.
Yes. Yeah.
How
It's
was that?
been it was exhausting.
I
But
bet.
it was fun. I learned a lot. I met a lot of really great people. Um, yeah, it was quite an experience. Competition scene is something that I haven't been involved with at all. And so it was an interesting insight into that world.
Uh-huh.
I've been a spectator maybe twice. And so
Yeah,
to
wow.
really be kind of behind the scenes and seeing how everything works and sometimes doesn't work was interesting. And just, yeah, a really interesting insight into all of that. And it's kind of like a whole other category of the
The
coffee
industry.
industry.
Oh, yeah. I want to get into that in
Yeah.
a minute, but before we do, for people who don't know who you are, you're Barista Nomad on Instagram. Many people will know
Yes.
you from that. But tell us how you got into coffee and what your genesis story is. And
Yeah.
you and I met in a weird way many years ago, a few years ago now. And strangely enough, when I met you, I knew that somehow we were going to eventually end up being each other's paths. But I didn't.
Yeah.
I was one of those situations where I met you and thought, "Oh, there's something about her. I'm
Hmm.
going to meet her again." But why don't you
Hmm.
tell everyone this is not about me? This is about you. So why don't you tell everyone about your story?
Yeah, so I just started working in a cafe as a barista when I was a college student.
Mhm.
Um,
Where at? Where
and
were you at that point?
I was in Washington State, so I went to a university called University of Puget Sound, which is in Tacoma, Washington. And we had two cafes on campus. And my first semester of school, I was in a job that I hated, and one of my friends was like, "You should apply at, Diversions Cafe," which was the
Uh-huh.
name of one of the cafes that she worked at. And so I did, and I started working there. I We used coffee from a local roastery just up the street. It was called Valhalla Coffee Roasters,
Mhm.
and then throughout my years of school, we changed to a different roaster, Cafe Vita out of Seattle. And they kind of really opened my eyes to coffee past my little bubble of a school.
Uh-huh. What were
Um,
you studying, by the way? I'm fascinated what coffee people study.
yeah. So I started off as a music business major.
Oh, nice.
And then um, I knew from the beginning that I didn't want to be a performer, and it was very performer oriented. And I was like, that's
Uh-huh.
not for me.
And the music business
So,
is dead anyway, so there's no point going
okay.
into that.
Yeah. And so then I went to business leadership. So we had a
Hmm.
business leadership program at my school. Then I kept a minor in music because I was basically done with a minor by the first year of
Oh,
being a
wow.
music major. And then I also was a minor in Latin American studies.
Wow.
So my degree is in business leadership, but I had these other little fields of study that I was really interested in and stuff. So yeah.
So
Yeah,
then you were
so
there.
was working with Cafe Vita. Yeah, so working with Cafe Vita as our coffee supplier, and I ended up being the manager at that cafe. And one of the things that became important for me as a manager was having trained staff. And so I used to drive staff up to Seattle. It's like an hour drive. Um, every few months to do training, and I got to know all the people at Cafe Vita really well. And then I used to just like do cuppings with them whenever I could. And yeah, they kind of just opened my eyes into what coffee could be. Um, and then I ended up writing my senior thesis on different trade models for coffee around the world.
So
Um,
trading green coffee or the way that people traded roasted coffee?
no, green coffee.
Hmm.
So I kind of looked at fair trade, the commodity market, and at that point, direct trade was super popular too, and that that term was, I feel like, had become really popular in the 5 to 10 years before I was writing my thesis. And so I was mostly focusing on those three, but then I looked at like different certifications like Rainforest Alliance and blah, 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 and why people care about that stuff or really do that stuff and what it actually means, what those certifications kind of do. And so I interviewed a couple of people. I interviewed the green coffee buyer at Cafe Vita for that, and I interviewed somebody at Atlas Imports and a couple other, and then Valhalla Coffee Roasters, just people anybody who I kind of knew in coffee at that point, which was not very many people. And yeah, presented my thesis and just kind of like liked it. And I don't know, after I graduated, knew that I didn't want to get into an office job. I didn't want to be stuck in an office for 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week.
I'm jealous that you knew that. I finished my degree and then thought like that's just the next natural step. I have a science degree. I meant to either go into a lab. I tried that and that was shit. And so I thought, well, I'll go into the corporate world because that's what you're supposed to do when you've got a degree. And I went and did that for 8 years and realized, no, this is shit too. What do I do?
Yeah. So, I don't know. I just, and I was in a business leadership program. So all of my peers were applying for jobs with accounting firms, consulting firms, law firms, all these things. And I was like, I don't want that. And I applied for 0 jobs my entire senior year of college because I was just like, I don't want that. I don't know what I really want to do right now. I had started to kind of set myself up to work in the nonprofit sector. So with performing arts on the nonprofit side and doing more of like management, event planning, stuff like that. Because I did a couple of internships when I was in college, and I had an on-campus job that I was also event planning for our university.
Yeah.
But I had this hesitation that I was like, I don't want to jump into that right away. Again, I was just like, event planning was really fun for me, but I also knew that I was still leading up to events. You're still spending 40 plus hours a week in an office.
Oh, easy.
And yeah.
Leading up to our events, we're doing 100-hour weeks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so I was like, if my whole goal is to not be in an office all day, maybe that's not what I should be doing.
Yes.
I literally floated around for like the 7 months after I graduated from college. I went to Europe for a little bit, came back to the United States, went home to Los Angeles, was like sleeping on my mom's couch in the living room, and was broke. I had like $200 in my bank account.
We've all been there, my love. Many times.
I was like, what am I going to do?
Figure out this world of like, what the fuck do I want to do in this world?
Yeah. Yeah. And I was super sick. I got back from Europe and was so sick. It was the end of December. And I just decided I'm going to apply for jobs in cafes. And I still had all my contacts at Cafe Vita as well. So I was in contact with them. I did a very, very short stint at Intelli in Pasadena. And then about 2 months into that, I got a job offer in Northern California with a Cafe Vita account that was not yet open. And Vita helped connect me with them and help set that all up. They needed a coffee person in there who could also speak, or who could speak with a lot of knowledge about Cafe Vita's product to their coffees, because I already knew them and coffee in general. And yeah, so then I took that, and it was basically a contract job to help get this place up and open.
Were you scared?
I don't know. I don't really think I was that scared.
Were you more relieved that you just landed something?
I think I was relieved that I landed something that was also going to pay well for somebody straight out of college. And working in coffee, because a lot of coffee jobs don't, they pay minimum wage or $1 above minimum wage. And so, Yeah, and I had family in Northern California, and I was like, all right, I'll stay with them, spare bedroom. And um, yeah, it was just kind of like pack everything up in a week. I literally packed everything up in a week and just drove up to Northern California, and that was that. And then 2 days after I got up there, started my first day.
Yeah, wow. What part of Northern California?
I was living in San Jose, and
Mm-hmm.
then the cafe was in Los Altos, Silicon Valley area. Yeah, which was a
That's
whole other world in and of
clusterfuck.
itself. It was crazy. And I'm very grateful for that experience. But whoa, that world is not for me.
Yeah,
That just like Silicon Valley was not for me at all. And I was working insane hours, just
that's Silicon Valley.
yeah, and was there to start this cafe or help open it, hire staff, train staff, order coffee, order whatever we needed. Um, yeah, and it was a 6-month contract, and I knew pretty early on that I wasn't. The owner said, "Oh, if things go well, we can turn this into a permanent position." But I kind of knew early on I wasn't going to be happy just
Mm-hmm.
in that area. Um, so I started looking for something else, and through a random family friend connection, knew somebody who happens to have property in Hawaii, and she grows coffee. And
Wow.
um, got in contact with her and was kind of trying to figure out, do you need help around your property? Could this kind of be like a work trade kind of a thing? Or, what? And she kind of just took a chance on me and was like, yeah, sure, you can come. Like, you'll be here during harvest season. You can pick coffee. I'll get you in contact with the property manager who takes care of the coffee and brings his team of coffee pickers over, however many times a week and blah, blah, blah. She was going to be out of town for the majority of the time that I would be here. And she was like, you can just stay in the house. And that was kind of that. And so I got here and did that. And very quickly, first of all, had a huge appreciation for the amount of work that it is to pick coffee.
Oh, yeah. We're going to talk a lot about that.
Yeah. Uh, and then also realized that I'm not picking coffee every day. What else am I going to do with my time? I like to stay busy, which is,
I can
yeah.
relate.
So it's like, what am I going to do with my other 3 days where I'm not picking coffee, or 4 days where I'm not picking coffee? So I ended up getting a job in town here. And here is the Big Island, Kona side of the Big Island, which is the west side. And so I got a job at with a coffee company in Kona and was baristaing on my days off from the farm and picking coffee. And I remember there was one day a week where I would pick coffee in the morning, take a shower, get dressed, go to work in the evenings, and go make coffees and stuff.
And I bet you loved it.
Yeah, it was great. It was awesome. It was crazy, and it was this crazy surreal experience of being like, I am picking this coffee, sending it off to get processed, and then I'm going and working in a cafe the very next day or that evening, and just being able to touch coffee at every level in one day was amazing to me.
I can only imagine. That must be a dream. It's like a chef that grows their own veggies and then
Yeah,
gets to cook them and serve them in a restaurant.
yeah, and it was just like, this is so cool. It was a really interesting experience for me in Hawaii, and I thought I was only going to be here for 4 months when I first moved here.
So
I was
what
like,
year was that? How long ago was that?
that was in 2014.
Uh-huh. Had you been
And
to Australia yet at that? I think that's around the
no,
time, wasn't it? Or is it
yeah,
soon after that?
so soon. So the original plan was I was going to come to Hawaii for 4 months for one harvest season, do a year in Australia, do a year in New Zealand,
Uh-huh.
kind of putz around and figure out my life and eventually go somewhere else. I don't know.
That never stops if you're doing it
Yeah.
right, by the way. You'll never figure it out. Just saying.
Yeah. So I just fell in love with Hawaii pretty quickly. And so I wanted to stay longer. So I ended up staying for 9 months during that first time. And the only reason why I left is because I already had my visa to go to Australia. And I didn't want it to expire and me not be able to use it. And it's like, well, there goes that opportunity. You can't do it again. So I left here in May of 2015 and went to Australia and went to Sydney. And we met soon after that. And we can get into my whole Australia experience a little bit later too, but that was crazy. I did not last very long in Sydney, let's say that.
Isn't it a whole different level of baristering?
It's just like a whole different level of like intense city life, man. Whoa. And coming from like sleepy town in Hawaii to that was like jarring. Yeah. So it was in Australia.
The coffee scene is intense over there. The city life is intense over there. Not as intense as New York because we don't have as many people. But at the same time, the coffee scene is so different because everybody is on board with it. Like the coffee drinking culture is very well progressed over there. Did that surprise you?
No, I think I had kind of expected it. I think what I was surprised by is that there are a lot of these small differences in coffee service that caught me off guard.
Like what?
And, well, like baby chinos.
Oh, the supreme of all supreme coffee beans with no coffee in them.
Yeah. And like a
baby
piccolo.
chinos. Oh, yeah. Baby chinos will make or break a business. I know that for anyone who's listening that doesn't know what a baby chino is, it's literally just the dry part of a cappuccino. It's just microfoam with no liquid, just all dry froth and some chocolate on top. But we sell them for 50 cents or $1. Some places it's probably at $1.50 by now. And they're served in a small, like 4-ounce cup, 2-ounce cup, depending on where you are. And look, if you make a good baby chino, and let me tell you, these little fucking kids can tell you the difference between a good baby chino and a shit baby chino, and they will just flat out refuse to go to a cafe that has shit baby chinos. And so therefore their parents won't buy their coffee from a place that doesn't make good baby chinos. I've had children cry when I told them that I was leaving.
Oh my gosh.
Cry. Who's going to make my baby chino now? It's like,
oh my God.
I'm like, okay. The parents are like, you got to tell us where you're going next and where you're going to be making coffee next because my kid's addicted to your baby chinos and nobody else here can make them the way that you do. So you got to be going to somewhere else that's in the local area. It's crazy how a non-coffee product is the thing that defines a lot of cafes.
Yeah. And but they freaking sell like crazy. It's so the first time I ever got a baby chino order, I was like, what the heck is that? And the people who I was working for were like, aren't you an experienced barista? And I'm like, yeah, but we don't have this in the United States.
Do you know the number of cafes I've tried to get to serve baby chinos over here? And I'm like, I'm telling you, put baby chinos on your menu and eventually the parents are going to figure out that this is a way to shut my kid up for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I could sit and have a coffee in peace over a baby chino. Anyone who's listening to this that wants to transform their menu, put a fucking baby chino on the menu. And I promise, especially if you get parents. If you get parents turn up, we would get the pram brigade.
Oh, like
Prams.
Oh, yes.
You've seen that, right? Mothers groups. They show up. Baby chinos are... It's an easy win.
Baby chinos and flat whites and cappuccinos.
Exactly. I have a baby chino and a flat white, please. Baby chino comes with a little marshmallow or a tiny teddy. And the cappuccino. Do you remember tiny teddies that people used to put on there? They put like a little tiny teddy on the teaspoon. Kids would go nutso.
Yeah.
And the chocolate ring, we used to call it the baby chino ring of glory because when the baby puts it up to their face and they get the stain around their face. It's these little things that like can transform like the additional buys that people make. It's like it's a 50-cent drink that ends up selling $15 worth of beverages for the whole stay, because then the kid wants
Yeah.
a cookie, and then a kid wants another baby chino, and
Yeah. And I've heard you kind of talk about it before on this podcast, but it's setting up the culture of coffee drinking too from that age, and having it be that time where you're like, it's a coffee date and you're going with your parent or your friend or whomever. And that's setting up that culture. And it's really interesting it was fascinating for me to see that. Like I said, just all these small differences in coffee culture were just, it threw me for a while.
Yeah, children are socialized into it from very young, especially in the last, let's say, 8 years. When kids are like after school, they go to a cafe with their date, with one of their, like, they'll have a daddy-daughter date, especially with like parents who are no longer together. This is a really good way for parents to bond with their kids. So they'll bring them to a cafe after school and sit there. And, we as the baristas are a part of this idea of, okay, so the father will come up and say, so I'm going to get her to come and order her baby chino. It's okay, just let her do it, and she'll order, and you'll help her count the change out to make sure that it's right. And it's a way that we have ensured the future generations of our industry are going to continue to come back as a part of the culture as they grow up.
Yeah.
I'd love to see more people do it here.
Yeah, and I even think when you see things at, I feel like Starbucks does like a puppuccino or something.
A puppuccino? Yeah. Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's just frothed milk, and you just add some chocolate powder on top, and that's what it is.
And, it's a lot of the places. I have a client who was trying to get it put in there, and what we were doing was oat milk for the puppies is very good as opposed to cow. So making a homemade oat milk, but when you're soaking the oats, if you get pig's ears, those ears that the puppies chew on, if you soak that in with the oats overnight, and then you just strain it and blend it and serve that to the puppies, they love it. They absolutely love it. As a vegan, awesome. I'm not advocating for that behavior. You can leave out the pig's ears, I'm just saying. But, these are things that you can do and try. And look, if people can shut their dogs up for 5 minutes or have their dogs really happy, same as with their kids, that gives them a few minutes peace.
Yeah.
Do you have many puppuccinos on the Big Island? I doubt it.
Oh man, we don't have enough good
like over there.
There really isn't much of one. It's over here, so much is catered toward tourism.
I can imagine.
And so a lot of the cafes are just going for tourists, and they're just going for, it's Kona coffee, it's Hawaii coffee, and that's all that they really care about. There's a lot of flavored coffees, like in the roasting type of flavored. So you can buy a bag of like macadamia nut Kona coffee, or vanilla Kona coffee, or coconut Kona coffee. And it's also this like perception, I think, of tourists that like, oh, we're in Hawaii, everything has coconut and macadamia nuts. Everything, right?
Wait, what? Really? Macadamia nuts in Hawaii? Is that a big thing?
Yeah. So there's a big macadamia nut industry here too. So we grow a lot of mac nuts. And people are always looking for mac nuts. Like, that's probably one of the biggest things that sells in shops, are like chocolate covered mac nuts, or the bags of macadamia nuts, sea salt mac nuts. Yeah.
So let's talk about Kona coffee.
Yeah.
People who are listening to this podcast might not understand that there is a lot of controversy that has been going on over the years about Kona coffee and is starting to come to a head. Let's tell people what Kona coffee is. Let's tell people about the fact that we have in the US our own homegrown coffee, and it's in Hawaii. Why don't you take it from here and tell us about Kona coffee?
Yeah. So Kona coffee is any coffee grown in the Kona region on the big island of Hawaii. So Hawaii Island has probably over 1,000 coffee farms on it.
1,000 coffee farms. Did you just say that right? Not
Yeah,
trees, farms.
farms.
Wow. Okay, I
They're
didn't
all
know that.
small. Most of them are small.
Like
I would say
micro
that
lot small or
like 5 acres.
okay, that's a decent amount.
So yeah, but then you have some that are, people who are only planting 2 acres or whatever. So there's a range, but a lot on the Big Island are these small farms, and there's, like I said, probably over 1,000 farms on this island, and I'd say 800 to 900 are in Kona. And so Kona as a district is really well known as a coffee growing region or the coffee growing region in Hawaii, kind of because of the number of farms, but also because this region, for some reason, just really did a really good job of marketing themselves
Yeah.
in like the 80s and 90s.
But we
And
don't have
so,
another coffee growing region in the States, except California's coming up now. Like they're doing that, and they're focusing, from what I understand, the people who are behind the marketing of that have looked at what you guys are doing in Kona and what you have done in Kona. But other than Hawaii and a little bit of California, is there anywhere else in the States that's doing coffee?
I feel like I heard of one random farm somewhere in like Georgia several years ago, but I don't know if
Which
anything
part
ever
of the
came of
country
that.
is that? Georgia
Georgia's
is
southeast,
okay.
so just above Florida. Yeah.
Okay.
But that was several years ago, and I haven't heard anything really since. There was like one article that I read. But the thing to understand is Kona is one growing region out of several in Hawaii.
Okay.
So on our island, Hawaii Island, there are actually 4 growing regions. So Kona is one of them. The other one is Ka'u, and Ka'u is in the southern part of the island. It's actually the largest district in Hawaii with the smallest population. Population density is
Wow.
tiny there.
Why is that?
There's a lot of lava rock.
Okay. Which is, hey, a whole nother
Yeah.
other clusterfuck you guys are dealing with right now.
Yeah, yeah. Not that lava rock. It's older lava rock, but you can't really grow very much stuff on a lot of the land in Ka'u because of one of the biggest lava flows that happened centuries ago. But you can't build on there very easily either. It takes a lot of manpower and time and funds to build on there, and so there's
Because
just like
of
not
the
really.
lava, because it's so dense.
Yeah, because it's so dense, it's so hard to hammer into lava rock. It's just very intense.
Is the soil around there though that is growable on? Is it densely nutrient rich? Is that why they grow coffee there?
Yeah, so there are some areas that weren't part of, they're like old, much older lava flows. So you have soil there.
Okay.
And that is pretty nutrient rich. And it's also pretty lush there, but there are these pockets of areas in Ka'u. But the majority of it is this one area called Ocean View, and it's literally just like this massive lava flow from one of the volcanoes, and it's just black the entire way down to the ocean.
Did you freak out living in a country that has so many? In a state. Sorry, that's me being.
It's okay. People do it all the time.
Yeah, no doubt. It really should be its own country. But is it weird living in a state with so many volcanoes and one that's quite active right now?
I don't know. I feel like we don't really think about it that much.
It's like
last year. Yeah, exactly. Last year, obviously, everybody was thinking about it all the time because of that lava flow, but it was kind of this, it doesn't happen super often, and also it happens in such isolated areas where you kind of expect it to happen. So where that lava flow was last year, it's literally called Lava Zone 1, which means You will
Shit.
have.
Okay.
Like, there will be lava there one day. It's just going to happen.
Lava
And
Zone
you don't know
1.
when, but
Wow.
it's a definite thing. So there are basically on this island, everything is zoned out into lava zone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think it goes up to 7 or 8, meaning that's going to happen maybe in 300 years or something. We don't really know. But zones 1 and 2, and even 3, you kind of can assume that it'll happen in a lifetime. So yeah, that area, it was like, okay, it's lava zone 1. It's devastating for the people who were affected, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But a lot of the people too who live there are just like, hey, this is the price we pay to live here. It's the cheapest area to live on the island. You can buy land there for a few $1,000s.
Wow.
And so people go there because it's actually affordable to live there. But that's the risk that comes with it too, is that there's going to be a lava flow. We can't tell you when, but this is lava zone 1 and 2. And like, it's going to happen. So yeah, I mean, where I am in Kona, I don't think we really think about it very much, because if there were to be a lava flow there's 2 active I guess kind of 3 active volcanoes. 2 of them are.
You're so blasé about it. It's fucking great. Well, there's 1, 2, maybe 3 active volcanoes in my neighborhood just down the road.
Well, so this island is made of 5 volcanoes.
Okay, awesome. That must feel great.
2 of them are
Who
dormant.
tell me, oh, you're living on the San Andreas fault line, just so that you know.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, we got 5 volcanoes though. Yeah, so 2 of them are lava, which again, I think people are not as scared by, because lava flows, they happen over time. They can move quite quickly. Like lava flows can move quite quickly, but they have to build kind of a path for themselves to do that first. I went to an amazing presentation by a couple of scientists with the U.S. Geological Survey, whatever, something like that, USGS. And they talked about this last lava flow. It's amazing what nature can do. But you can see it coming, when the first like fountain started in that neighborhood, it was like, okay, you can pack up and leave now. Or you stick around and you risk it and you wait and see what happens. There's one volcano, which is the closest one to me, which would be if it ever...
No, still can't get over that. I've got a volcano in my neighborhood. Go on.
Well, I live on the slopes of this volcano. It's called Hualalai.
Okay, it's not in my neighborhood. It is my neighborhood.
Yeah.
Okay, that's much better. Go on.
That one, if it goes off, that's like an explosive eruption, if that ever happens.
Which makes more sense as to why you'd live on it. Crazy motherfucker.
Yeah, I don't even know. It's just, you don't really think about it, I guess. You're just like, yeah, it's going to happen eventually. And when it happens, that kind of eruption, whenever it happens, it'll be massive. And scientists predict that you'll be able to have the ash fall, or you'll see the ash fall on Oahu, which is a 45-minute flight away.
Wow.
So what, San Francisco, Los Angeles is that distance?
You're probably in the best place you want to be then. Like if it's going to do something, it's going to take you out quick and
right.
It won't happen. That's probably
exactly. So it's kind of like there's nothing you can do about it. If that happens, it happens, and that's it, and it's over, and okay, whatever.
You're living in a simulation anyway, so you'll just get brought back into
exactly.
So I'm not even half joking. Most people are like, "Oh, she's one of those." Yeah, I'm one of those. I believe we're living.
Oh, I've had these conversations before. I'm fascinated by simulation theory. I need to read more about it, but I've had these conversations with several people in my life before, and I'm like, yeah, I can totally get on board with that.
Do you want to put yourself in a hole with one question?
Oh, I don't know. Do I?
You do. It's the question that led me to believe that we're living in a simulation. Put yourself in a hole one night asking yourself, what's the purpose of purpose?
Thank you for that tonight.
Let me tell you, that started about 2.5 years ago, and I've been in a hole ever since thinking about it, because it's a great question to ask at dinner parties. It's a fantastic question if you want to see that, like, if someone you've recently met is going to become a friend of yours, if they can keep up with that conversation. You really get to know a lot about people with that. There was a massive Twitter conversation about it. I posed it to a bunch of really intelligent people. Some people might know who Brett Weinstein is and Eric Weinstein. They've been on the Rogan podcast a lot. One of them's a mathematician. The other one's an evolutionary biologist. And I posed it to those guys, and there are a couple thousand tweets of like their community getting involved in that. You look at the idea of like the purpose of purpose, like not what is purpose. That's not what we're talking about. What's the point of having a purpose? And people are like, well, having a purpose drives you to want to procreate. And it's like, well, so what about people who have deliberately chosen not to procreate? What is the purpose of purpose then?
Purpose is very egocentric. Wouldn't it be?
Well, but is it? Or is it a construct that has been conditioned into us from the time that religion became a thing, so that you can align yourself with different religious purposes?
Yeah, I could see that too. I mean, religion is crazy as well. And I think has molded our societies in so many crazy ways. And sometimes I wonder how things would be very different if we hadn't kind of gone down the rabbit hole of religion as well.
Absolutely.
And all of that. Yeah.
And that's one of those things where, like, when you look at the idea of purpose, was purpose created as a construct to bring people into this idea of religion, which could have died as a concept. And they used the idea of purpose to recruit people. And if you're aligned with our purpose, you can be a part of our tribe. And the more people we recruit, the more validity our purpose has. And so therefore, you know, our group has more people than your group. It's then when you think about, okay, so if that was part of the purpose of purpose, that's interesting. What about those of us who are not in religion? What purpose does having a purpose serve? So 2.5 years into it, the only thing I can tell you is that having a purpose is the only thing that will keep you alive. I don't know the point of having it, because so for someone like me who doesn't want to have children and isn't a part of a religion, if you remove the purpose from my life, I have no reason for existing. Then I'm just an empty shell, really. I'm just kind of cruising through life. And eventually going down that path, you end up being suicidal and highly depressed. And so purpose keeps someone like me alive.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, unless you don't have something, be like, I'm going to get up and do this today.
Right.
You just
because we
stay in bed.
We existed, like, you think of a time before religion where people almost worshipped nature. People didn't have a purpose. They just existed like animals in the wild. You know, like we existed.
Your purpose that day was, I'm going to get up, go find something to eat, go to the restroom, whatever, in the bushes, and walk around.
And exist with my tribe.
Yeah.
And
then until I need my next meal.
And then I'm going to go and feed myself and help feed my tribe and play my role in this tribe. But that's not a purpose. That's an existence. And they were perfectly happy doing that. Did our sense of purpose or did the need for a sense of purpose evolved as we evolved into like living as civilized people.
Well, and how did that thought process start too? Like, why did we evolve to start having those thoughts of like, I need to have a purpose in my life or in my day or whatever? Why did that happen? I don't think anybody knows.
I wonder.
I don't.
I think the idea of purpose was different then than it is right now, and I wonder if it was a trick. I don't know whether it's something that evolved and became something that we did as we became more industrialized, or more that our tribes grew and we had to have more competition, and we had to trade and barter and do all those kinds of things, or if it was a trick by religion to get us in on their agenda. But seriously, this question, anyone who thinks that they could be bored, just start chewing on this question. If you want to have some fun, maybe have a little bit of a smoke and do it too, or take some mushrooms. I'm going to do mushrooms this year. I've never done mushrooms before, and I don't smoke weed, so I live quite a straight-laced life, but I'm going to do mushrooms and think about this question this year.
And try,
it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. It's, those questions are good to think about in those states of mind. It's fascinating.
Yeah,
I've never
really
done mushrooms either, but I am super intrigued by them. And
open invitation, lady. You just let me know when you come to San Diego, and I'll make things happen. We can have a conversation over mushrooms and the purpose of purpose.
And the purpose of purpose. Yeah. Well, I don't know if you've ever. Well, you just said you've lived a pretty straight-laced life, but been around maybe people who have been on LSD as well.
That's something that I think would be interesting. I'm really fascinated by LSD, mycelium, acid, DMT. I think that these are the kinds of things that led people to write stories in the Bible about bushes and like a whole bunch of these texts, the Quran. A lot of this stuff was came through, I believe, psychedelic experiences that were practiced by shamanic-like influences in those tribes and in those communities. And I think they're just fascinating. There's a lot of research that's going into them right now, and they're being used for some really useful things like PTSD, depression, anxiety. Yeah. And I experience a lot of anxiety, but we live in a fucked up world, which is why I experience a lot of anxiety. Moving from Australia to America, not good for the nerves, got to tell you. Not good at all, especially in the Trump era.
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah. That was me going from Hawaii to Sydney. It's like,
really?
Whoa. Yeah, it was just really intense. But again, completely different lifestyle in Hawaii versus in Sydney. Completely different type of people who live in these places too. I ended up going to Melbourne.
Oh, and Melbourne's quite different from Sydney. It's much more welcoming than Sydney is.
Yeah, it was a lot. I was much happier there.
Yeah.
Much like very quickly. Yeah.
Sydney's very cliquey. Like a lot of people say to me, I want to go and work in coffee in Sydney or in Melbourne, and you kind of got to assess if they've got what it takes. Sydney's a super bitchy city. I hate to say it.
Yeah, it was intense. And I just felt like, oh my God, I felt so frumpy in that city because I was just in my normal attire that I would wear in Hawaii and in Sydney, and everybody dresses so polished all the time. And I would just be on the train system, and I'd be like, oh my God, I can't wear my flip-flops here. Like, I can't wear sandals. You can't. You have to wear proper shoes. You have to dress nice all the time. I was like, I probably look like a homeless person to all these people because I'm just wearing.
But coffee people are spending hundreds of dollars to look like they're homeless in Sydney. At the espresso bars, really. They're like spending loads of money to look homeless. And it's like, this is strange. This is really weird. I don't see the point in spending lots of money on clothes that you're going to get coffee all over. because everything's so high volume, you're spilling shit all over yourself.
Yeah. And it's a weird, people do that though. Like I remember when I was growing up and all of a sudden the like torn jeans came into fashion. And I never owned them, but I remember my parents being like, you are never having those because why am I going to spend $60 on a pair of jeans that have a hole in them, 2 holes in them, whatever? Like, no, you already do that to yourself when you go playing around and like, you know?
I'm just going to buy you normal jeans within about 3 weeks. They're going to have holes in them anyway. Super shortcut to getting really expensive jeans.
But people, it was so weird. I remember when that happened, and it still happens. Like I remember seeing not too long ago a young woman who is in a family that is very wealthy, and she had a hole in her sweatshirt. And I was going to go up to her and be like, oh, hey, you have a hole in your sweatshirt, just to let you know if you want to like, I would sew it up, whatever. And then I got closer and I realized, oh, there are holes in this sweatshirt.
And she spent $1,000 on this sweatshirt because it had holes in it.
And they're intentionally there. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm not going to say anything. No, all right. And just turn around and
right now.
But I was like, oh, this is interesting. Why would you do that? It looks weird. Fashionable. I suppose I should have kept that gray sweatshirt I had that had some holes here and in other places too, instead of getting rid of it. But yeah.
Don't you know?
Yeah. Anyway.
The purpose of purpose. You should definitely put yourself in a hole one night. Have a smoke.
Okay.
And is weed legal in Hawaii?
Medical is.
Okay. Have a smoke. Listen to start that question and see where you end up with it, or do it at a dinner party. It's really fantastic.
Interesting.
So when you and I met in Sydney, that was at a 5 Senses cupping when Elixir was just becoming a thing. Elixir had just been born. So that would have been about 4 years ago. And it was the United Cup of Joe cupping that they did.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah.
Ben Bicknell, shout out to Ben Bicknell. Ben, I had just got back from the States, and Ben had said to me, he knew that we were making some Elixir out of some American coffees that I had purchased. And he said to me, you want to bring some Elixir so we can like let everybody taste it? And that's when you and I met.
Yeah, that is.
And I don't know why. When I met you, I knew I thought to myself, she's going to be something in coffee one day. It's going to take her a minute to get there, but she's super intentional about what she's trying to do. And I think that this is going to be something special. She's going to do really well. And I just knew our paths would cross. And I didn't know how. And then when I started Map It Forward, that's when you got back in contact.
Yeah. I don't even know how I found the podcast, because we weren't really connected on any social media outlets at all. I have no idea how I found it, but I came across it and I was like, oh, I know her. Like we met in Sydney. And I was like, yeah. And I just started listening to the whole, like I've literally listened to every episode of the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so surprised. I remember I put the goal that by the end of the first year, I was hoping like 30 people were listening to this podcast, regularly. We're at 10,000 people a month.
That's amazing.
I'm like, what? What the fuck is going on? This is, 10,000 people a month. I'm like, wow.
That's amazing.
That many people are listening to these conversations. It's pretty cool. I'm getting people from, I don't know how people are finding out about it, but it's like this podcast is the highlight of my week, every week. It's awesome. My favorite thing to do, because we don't just let anybody come on here. People ask when they know somebody's coming on, they're like, okay, so how come you picked this person? I got asked that about you as well. Like, I've never heard of this person. So why did this person get an invitation?
Yeah.
So it's look, I'm really chuffed because, you know, it's in a world where it's so difficult to find people that want to have in-depth conversations where they can deep dive into their own brains and my brain. It's really great to find that can happen on a regular basis. And then other people get stimulated by it and fed by it. And then they go off and take those conversations into their workplaces and start those conversations with me. And I agree with you or I don't agree with you. And yeah, if you're listening to this podcast, do us a favor and hit us a like on iTunes or anything like that, just so that we know that you're listening. I can't believe that there are 10,000 people that listen to this podcast a month. And we've got like 16 5-star ratings on iTunes. I'm like, okay, I don't get it. You keep listening.
Well, okay, so I listen to it on Google Podcasts, and there's no way of like giving ratings on Google Podcasts.
I didn't even know it was on Google Podcasts.
Yeah, that's how I listen to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good
and I actually was wondering, because you always mention like Stitcher and iTunes, and I was like, does she not receive? I wonder if you receive information from Google Podcasts too, of people who are streaming it on there. Because if you didn't even know that it's on there, I don't know. So you might have more than 10,000 people listening.
Yeah, well, we have to check that out because that's what our statistics are showing. It's like it blows my mind that there are that many people. We're not even a year old yet.
Yeah.
So
it was like SCA was your first episode last year, huh?
Well, I was speaking to Scott about it the other day. I'm like, so we're coming up to 12 months since he was the first person who came on. So I'm like, it's coming up to 12 months since we did the first podcast with you. I think we should celebrate and have you on again. So we're working on something special there. We've got an interesting something happening, which I can't fucking wait. I got to tell you, I can't fucking wait for it to happen. But you recently competed in, it was Brewers Cup, right?
Correct. Yeah, Brewers Cup.
At the US Coffee Champs in the pre-final. Do they call it the finals?
In the Nationals.
It's the pre-Nationals, right? The Nationals. So it's the pre-Worlds.
Right, exactly.
So how does it work in Hawaii? Do you have just one competition for all of Hawaii, or is it?
Yeah. So how it works for the coffee their coffee champs in general is that people apply to host prelim competitions wherever, like in whatever city or town, and then Coffee Champs gives those prelim competition slots to certain places depending on who applies and blah blah blah. So last year was the first time that Hawaii had hosted a prelim ever for any coffee competition, and so we hosted Brewers Cup, and we did it on Oahu. And so Oahu is the island that has Honolulu on it, and Honolulu is the capital. So you kind of we chose Oahu for several reasons. One, most of the baristas in Hawaii live on Oahu. So making it accessible to the majority of the people, as many people as we could. Two, there are several large companies there that have equipment resources that we could use. And three, there is a facility called the Hawaii Agricultural Research Center that is on Oahu, and they have two different locations, both of which have coffee planted on them. And so we hosted it at one of their facilities in kind of their big general use room, because we wanted it to be this really unique experience of hosting a coffee competition on a research farm. And it was really cool because one whole wall of this room were just these glass panels peeking into the labs. You could see all of the like test rooms and everything that they're doing in there, huge filing cabinets of whatever research, all of their like active research that they're doing there. And then the other room were these massive garage doors that just opened up to coffee field.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, which was very cool. So
How many did you get a lot of competitors?
we had 15 people register, and we had several drop out for personal reasons, emergencies, things that happened. So we ended up having, I think we only had like 10 people ended up actually competing. And so from that, the top 4 automatically get a spot to advance to the qualifiers. And so I placed second, and so I went to the Denver qualifier. That was in December. And then from there, I placed 5th at the Denver qualifier. So then I moved on to nationals because the top 24 total of the qualifiers moved on to nationals.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And then, well, so what coffees did you use?
So I used Kona coffees.
We're going to come back and talk about the whole Kona thing in a second, but we'll talk about the Coffee Champs thing now. So you used from which farm?
So in the prelim, the organizers provide coffee because you're only given a compulsory coffee basically, because just to kind of see how well you can brew coffee essentially without knowing very much about it. So we had 2 sponsors donate coffee. One was a farm called Hollow Tree, and they're here in Kona. And then one was from a roastery called Daylight Mind. And oh my God, I can't believe I can't remember which coffee they sponsored, but it was also a Kona coffee. And so in the prelim, you get to choose one of the 2 coffees to brew for the judges. So the first day, all the competitors cup the coffees together and you choose which one you want to brew. And so I used Hollow Trees. And then Hollow Tree sponsored me to go to Denver as well. So I used their coffee in Denver. And it was a blend of their natural process, Typica coffee, and their washed red bourbon, which was awesome. It was a delicious coffee, and really, really just beautiful coffees. And then for nationals, I used a blend of 2 coffees produced by a farm called Greenwell Farms. And that was a blend of a K7 variety that they actually inoculated with SEMA yeast during their washing processing.
Do you know how long they fermented that for?
I don't know. I would say overnight.
Okay, so
it's still there. Yeah, it was basically the first time that they tried that fermentation for this coffee.
Wow.
And so it was kind of crazy way that I just ended up using these coffees. They invited 2 of my colleagues over to their farm to cup some coffees, and they were kind of just like, we don't really know how these are. We tested some different processing and fermentation, and we're playing with yeasts, and we don't know we're not really sure if we're impressed by these or not. And I got a text later that afternoon from one of my colleagues, and she was like, you need to taste these coffees and you need to use them in the competition. Because
go ahead.
Yeah. She's like, they're just really special and they're delicious, and we rarely taste Kona coffee like this. And so, a few days later, I cupped them too, and I was just like, this is amazing. So
how do you come up with the decision of the blend? Because most people are using singles at competition, right? I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Competition world is really new. Well, not new to me, but it's I never dived into it. So I'm not as versed as I could be. But from what I understand, people align themselves with a farm and they use a particular origin, a particular coffee from that farm. How did you and why did you decide to use a blend?
Yeah, so the other part of that blend is a coffee called Mamo, which is actually a coffee breed that is specific to Hawaii, and it's a cross of Maragoipe and Mocha. So a huge bean and a tiny bean. And this project started about 20 years ago at that research facility on Oahu with one of the scientists, coffee geneticists over there. And she basically was just like, why don't we just kind of make our own variety in Hawaii? Like, what do we think about that? And at the time, mocha was starting to become really popular in Hawaii. And Maraguipe was also interesting. People were interested in it. I think the bean size was important for a lot of people. Yields, it was. So she just chose these two coffees for several different reasons. And right now it's in its 5th generation. And so I wanted to use Mamo because of the story behind it and the fact that it is truly a Hawaii coffee, bred for Hawaii, for our growing conditions, all of that, and for keeping yield in mind, keeping quality in mind. And so that was why I really wanted to use that one. It's still kind of young as a coffee variety. Like I said, it's in its 5th generation. And so while it's interesting, it doesn't have tons of, let's say, brightness to it. There might be some later on because, we also sorted it in different ways, and some sorted one way tasted way on one end of the spectrum, sorted a different way. Tasted
that shit.
Yeah, it was crazy. I actually want to mess around with it a lot more. Hopefully, if I have some more time. Leading up to the competition, it was kind of just running. So that's why I really wanted to use Mamo, but I wanted to bring something else into it. And this K7 was super high in acidity, and really interesting, but kind of a little bit too intense on phosphoric acidity on its own. And so we kind of just were like, well, what if we bring in that K7 to introduce more acidity to the cup, and the Mamo will help balance it out and not have that acidity just be so spiked and so intense. So we played around with a couple of different ratios of bringing those two coffees together. And I mean, a lot of it was the story behind it for Mamo, as I said already, and for K7, because it's so innovative for Hawaii. K7 is a very, you don't find that variety here very much. People grow Typica, Bourbon, Caturra, but other varieties are still not super popular. So K7 is unique for us. And the fact that they did a yeast inoculation was also really interesting. And so for me, it was more about being able to build a story around it and show people, communicate to people that like, this is what's happening in Hawaii. And like, this is why Hawaii coffee is really interesting, because people are doing so many cool things with varieties or processing. The fact that we have our own coffee variety that's currently being generated and stuff is really interesting. So that's why I landed on that.
Do you think that if that particular coffee variety is able to stabilize as it goes further into generations, do you think that will become more widespread? Because Kona coffee has such a reputation. It's not that it necessarily,
for better or worse.
Sorry?
For better or worse.
For better or for worse. But it's definitely a highly sought after coffee by tourists. It's ridiculously expensive to buy. When we launched Elixir, my business partner she happened to be going to Hawaii, and I said to her, do me a favor, grab some Kona coffee. She texted me, she's like, so I just want to check you're aware how expensive Kona coffee is. I'm like, no, what's going on with that? And it was massively more expensive than other coffees. But I think that's got something to do with the fact that it's, it's grown in a country that uses US dollars as its currency. And so wages is going to be expensive. And when you're going to pay people fair wages, it's a highly labor intensive agricultural product to produce. Did that shock you when you realized how much work is going into picking?
I don't know if it shocked me, but I was just like, wow, I appreciate this so much more.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think I really thought about it that much before of how much work actually goes into it. I don't think I really thought about how many different hands touch this product and how many different processes it has to go through until I was picking coffee. And at the time, I mean, I feel like I was still quite young in my career in coffee. I had been working in coffee for, at that point, less than 5 years.
How long has it been now?
And over 9 years now.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I just don't feel like I had a huge understanding of the full spectrum of the coffee industry. And so it definitely made me appreciate it a lot more. Yeah, it's backbreaking work, man. And doing that for a season, I was like, damn, this is intense. And I don't even have to do this to make a living. I'm doing this because I'm here to learn, and I happen to be able to make this work as a work trade setup for me. So, you know, I don't have to depend on this as my income, but the people who have to depend on this as their income, they have to make it work. They have to pick a lot of coffee. And
tell us what it's like, because I've never picked coffee. I'm looking forward to going to Duluth. Shout out to James McCann, or McCann, as you'll say it here. He's going to let me come and spend some time when they finally have grown trees in Duluth here in Southern California. But what's it like? Like, tell me what the day is like for a coffee picker.
Yeah. So I would probably usually wake up at like 6 or 6:30, and you want to get started early because it gets really hot. And you know, I was wearing jeans, long socks, like my pants tucked into my socks, boots, usually a long sleeve shirt because of the mosquitoes. If I wasn't wearing a long sleeve shirt, I would just have mosquito bites all over my arms. So not only is it warm, but you're also dressing covered, because like you're just covering yourself because mosquitoes and dirt and bugs and everything. And I would have, so everything is handpicked in Hawaii except for a couple of farms. And so you have this bucket that sits in front of your stomach, basically, and it straps over your shoulders and across your waist. And it kind of hooks in the back on it as an X in the back. And you just go around the trees and you pick, and they fall into your bucket, and you just pick and pick and pick until your bucket is full.
But you don't pick all of the cherries, right? Like you have to select for what you're picking. Is that right?
Yeah.
So you're picking the ripe cherries.
Right. You're picking ripe if you're doing it well. That was another thing that I learned later. I actually, a few months ago, I posted a photo of like, this is what I picked when I first moved to Hawaii, and I had a photo from 5 years ago, of my bucket, and it's kind of mixed. There's no greens in there, but there's mixed ripeness. And then that day that I posted it, earlier in that day, I went to my backyard because we have coffee trees in the backyard, and I went and selected. I went and selected. I just wanted to. I had never tasted or done anything with the coffee that's in the backyard because we don't own the land, we rent, and so there's somebody who comes and takes care of the trees. But I was like, there's a lot of ripe cherries and they haven't been here, so I'm gonna go pick some coffee and see what it tastes like. And then I looked at my little bucket and I was like, wow, this is so beautiful and ripe and red. And I just putting these two pictures next to each other, I was like, now I have a better understanding of what I should be picking.
Yeah, wow.
Which also comes down to lack of training too from the people who were showing me how to pick. It's just oh yeah, that one's fine. Yeah, that one's fine too. You can pick those and stuff. Because if they're not being told something, then they're not going to do it. And then
standard coffee industry.
Yeah.
That happens at the cafe as well, love.
Yeah. And so it really depends on how the pickers are being asked to pick as well. And so back then, yes, ripe. I mean, always you want ripe, but I definitely was not picking ripe all the time. But yeah, you fill up your bucket with your cherries, and then you go over to your burlap bag and you empty your bucket over into your burlap bag, and then you go back into the field and keep doing it until your bag is full. And then when your bag is full, you either start a new one or it starts raining out because the afternoon rains come and some people pick through it. Again, because I was not doing this for my livelihood. It's like, I don't need to stand out here and get soaked in the rain and pick coffee. And so I would usually stop and tie up my bag. I also could not lift my bag because those things weigh 80 pounds when they're full of cherry. Or more. And so then you just tie it up, load it up onto a truck, and then it goes off. And that's it.
How long does it take you to fill a bag? A day?
Oh, for me, it would take a day. Yeah. There are people who would fill 2 bags in a day. I was probably picking about an average of 70 to 80 pounds a day. Other pickers who are doing this all the time are picking 200 pounds a day.
And do they get paid by the pound? Do they get paid? Wow.
Yeah. So they get paid by the pound. Again, which can get tricky with picking ripe all the time, because if they need to make a certain amount of money that day, they're going to want to make sure that they're making that amount of money, which makes sense. So you're paid per pound, but if the amount of coffee you picked in a day does not equal to a minimum wage for a day, then the farm owner has to pay you minimum wage instead of by the pound. So they have to pay you an hourly rate versus the per pound rate. So
wow.
Yeah.
What's the minimum wage in Hawaii?
I want to say it's like 10 or 10.20 an hour.
It's
something
close to
like
here.
that.
There are some parts of the country.
California's going up.
Yeah, next year we go to 15.
Yeah.
And all the cafes are fucking terrified.
Really?
Well, yeah, because right now they're at 12.
Damn. Whoa, it's going from 12 to 15 in 1 year? Holy shit.
So it's been increasing incrementally over the last few years, like $1 at a time. And so 2020, we go to 15, we go the final jump. It might be at 12.50 right now, but it's something, it's going to be, the final jump is the biggest one. And there are businesses that will shut down because of it. Because customers are not going to let you increase the prices by $3 a cup.
Yeah.
You know? Or even $1 a cup. You won't be able to do that.
Yeah, that's a whole other thing too, because we're just not paying enough for coffee. And I know you've talked about this a lot on the podcast too, about how much
we can never talk about it enough. It's something that I think at two ends of the spectrum, at the growing end as well as the selling end, we are not charging enough for cups of coffee. We're not paying our staff enough here in the States and a lot of other countries. Australia are the only country that are really paying the staff what they deserve. So those are the two ends of the spectrum that are not getting paid properly.
Yeah.
The bulk in the middle. And when I had Mookie on, I'm like, okay, so it's the roasters that are getting the big chunk of the money. And we need to fix it. We need to find somehow to kind of like get the roaster to either invest in the farms or find a way for them to, pass on some of those savings to the cafes who are loyal to them, so that the cafes are making a little bit more, and hopefully the cafes can split the difference with their staff. The margins on coffee aren't big enough. Go ahead.
Yeah, I haven't worked directly for a roasting company on the mainland ever. So I don't really know what the cost breakdown is for them. But here in Hawaii, for roasting, it can even be quite expensive because there's some pretty good import fees. that we have to pay. And shipping is the cost, because
that
it all has to come from the mainland.
So the import fee is to protect the local coffee economy, so you don't have to pay that fee on buying coffee that's from Kona. Is that correct? Or
I think it's
Hawaii?
mostly because you don't have to pay shipping on coffee from Kona.
Okay.
You know, but it's expensive on its own.
Yes.
So there's a higher cost for shipping. I don't know if there's an import fee. I can ask my colleague who's in the other room, but in order to like protect the local industry. But I know that there are just like costs here that don't exist on the mainland.
Yep.
And I usually attribute that to just being shipping. I've never roasted coffee. I don't know.
Neither have I.
I assume that it's attributed to the shipping costs.
Yep.
But I really don't know if there's also an additional fee on top of that for importing. Another thing, we cannot import African coffees to Hawaii.
Tell me why. I didn't know that.
I don't understand the reasoning. It's like, no African coffees because of like, I think like pest control, but it's like you're bringing in coffees from Central America, from Indonesia, from all around Asia too. Like they are all...
Yeah, wow. If anyone who's listening to this knows why, can you contact me and let me know?
Well, a lot of people talk about how it's competition. African coffees are...
But every coffee is competition.
Yeah. They're really different though. African coffees are super different, or at least historically, they've been very different. No, flavor profile is not similar.
To Hawaii coffee? To Kona coffee?
No. Oh. I don't really understand. I don't know. A lot of coffee professionals here are just like, man, we miss African coffee sometimes, just being able to drink them and taste them and roast them and stuff. So,
gosh, it's like that's like a Twilight Zone shit. That's like you're prohibiting a customer base from falling in love with a certain type of coffee because they may prefer it
over the local coffee.
Yeah. That's some capitalistic bullshit right there.
There's a lot of politics in our local industry, and there's a lot of people who want to keep African coffees out.
Which is a great segue into into some serious shit that's going on that let's preface this by saying you don't have the in-depth knowledge that we will eventually end up bringing a lot of experts onto the podcast to have a round table about this. But let's talk about some of the concerns and situations that are going on right now legally around a particular dispute that's happening. And again, we're not going to go too deep into it because we don't want you saying something that you don't know and end up getting into trouble for. But in general, what's going on with Kona coffee right now?
Yeah, so there was a news article that came out several weeks ago, maybe a month ago now, I don't even know, that basically announced there are 3 coffee producers in Kona who are suing retail outlets like Walmart, I think Costco,
and Target. I think one. Was Target the other one?
Maybe.
I think that's who it was. Yeah.
Okay. For selling coffee as Kona coffee that isn't actually Kona coffee. And so there's a long history of this in Kona. People blend coffee. They import coffee, usually from Central America, and they blend it in with a local coffee to create more, basically. Just have more coffee and still be able to sell it as Kona coffee. And this came up, or this has been happening for decades. And there was another big legal case that happened in the 90s where this was all brought to light. And basically what the result of that was a law that passed called the 10% Kona blend. So now you can blend in whatever coffees you want to with your Kona coffee, as long as 10% of it is still Kona coffee, and you can still call it a Kona blend. So they don't have to.
But it has to have blend on there, right?
Yes, it has to have blend on there, but you don't have to disclose how much of that coffee is actually Kona. And you don't have to disclose where the other coffee is coming from or what it is, what the quality of that coffee is. You don't know anything.
Wow.
The consumer knows nothing about it. All it says on the bag is Kona blend or 10% Kona blend.
And I bet that Kona is across in massive letters and the blend is in the tiniest little font that you can see.
Yeah. So it created it created, I guess, just this place for people to keep blending coffee in a way that was legal and was still kind of like disclosing, oh, but it's a blend. Like, we're telling the consumer it's a blend. So it's okay, but it still happens, and you still find people, or you still find coffee being sold as Kona that you're not sure if it is. A lot of these coffees too are being sold pre-ground. Because again, who knows what quality of the coffee really is?
Yeah, because you can't really, once it's ground, who knows if there's any fucking Kona in there? Because you can't tell. You can't do any tests when it's ground.
Yeah.
But
and there's nobody going around like checking the bags before they're going out to shipment to say, okay, yes, 10% of this is Kona or whatever. You just don't really know. Yeah. It's weird.
But surely the coffee community is super trustworthy around that shit. Not at all. Anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to say that about our industry, but there is the number of legit operators versus the number of operators that know what they can get away with and are going to get away with it. There's a big, big difference in those numbers.
Yeah. And they want to increase their profit margin.
And absolutely. That's that bullshit. And I'm a fan of capitalism. I just think that if you're somebody who's giving your customer something other than what they're paying for, you're an asshole. And stop doing it. Like, you don't need to do that. Just do good business. Give people what they want. Anyway.
Yeah. And I mean, I even fell into that trap when I first moved here. I went to the market, and as I kind of said earlier, there isn't really much of a coffee cafe culture here. So you go to the supermarket to buy coffee, and I was looking at, the shelves of coffee, and I'm like, whoa, this is either really expensive or I can spend $8 on a 12-ounce bag.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, maybe I'll just get that. And so I bought that. And the first time that the woman who owned the property where I was, that she came over, she saw that, and she was just like, so this is the shit coffee that you don't buy. She's like, this is what's happening. And she first told me about the whole thing that was going on. And I was like, oh, I had no idea.
Yeah.
That's fascinating, because you also don't see this happening in other coffee growing regions, really, where they're blending their coffee and selling it as El Salvador blend. No. Or Guatemala blend. If it's a Guatemala blend, that's all from Guatemala, from different regions, you would assume.
Well, just on that.
Well, maybe, okay.
Yeah, so what's happening is, like, in a country like Mexico, this is the stories that I've been told. So, for example, what you might get is that there are coffees that are being imported into one place from Central America and then getting shipped into America, let's say. And because Mexican coffees sell for more expensive than El Salvadorian coffees sometimes, they'll just brand them all as Mexican coffees.
So that's what's happening in Kona.
So that happens. Like, it's not just something that happens in Kona. It's something
interesting.
At the end of the day, and look, this is stuff that I've learned on the podcast. It's not stuff that I knew before. Honestly, before this podcast started, I was a fucking imbecile and completely clueless to any of this stuff. And that's the thing I'm the most grateful for this podcast for, is that it's taught me so much about the supply chain. But people, this is why we should be doing direct business with farmers, because then we know what we're getting. Then we know we're not being tricked. But when you're buying a container from somewhere And, you know, it's all Mexican coffee. But what you don't know is that coffee that came through Mexico may have been from other regions in Central America. And they've just decided that that's the way they're going to get a better price for it. So why not? Like, but you're looking at this coffee and you're looking at this coffee and you're like, they both have the same name on it. The bag says that it's the same coffee, but these are clearly different coffees.
Right.
And that's what that's attributed to. They may not even be grown in the same country.
How fascinating. I didn't realize that was happening there too.
Neither did I recently. Yeah. So from the article that I read, the lawsuit talks about the fact that, and correct me if I get these numbers wrong, $20 million worth of Kona coffee is sold every year, but $2.4 million is what's produced. Is that correct?
Pounds. So 20 million pounds versus
sorry.
2.5. You're good. Yeah. So
clearly a discrepancy.
Yes, clearly, obviously. So it was really interesting to me the time that article came out. Just a week or so before that, I had been speaking to a producer in Kona about this, and he was telling me, this is what's happening, and telling me, you know, I can see how many containers of coffee are coming into this state, and where is that coffee going, and who is importing all that coffee.
Wow.
And now you see how much coffee is being sold as Hawaii coffee or Kona coffee on the market. These numbers don't add up. How is it possible that we are selling this much coffee on the market when we know for a fact this is how much coffee we're actually producing? You know, our local Department of Agriculture does surveys every year of yield for coffee growing regions in Hawaii. And so we have access to to these numbers, and then to see how much is actually being sold. It's like, why isn't anybody saying anything about this? Or why isn't anybody doing anything about this? And so what this lawsuit, it's going after, like I said, these retailers.
Is it the right people to be going after though?
No, definitely not. So this is the conversation that I've had with this person as well, is like, that's the wrong person to go out. You're going after your customer. You're essentially going after your customer and suing your customer, and your largest customers at that too.
You should be going after the roaster.
Right. Or
the person who's bagging it.
Yeah.
Packaging it.
And
right?
so,
Am I wrong there?
Yeah. So here what happens a lot is that your producer or the mills are also your roasters. A lot of things are combined into a single operation.
So the coffee's grown, it's picked, it's sent to the mill for processing, correct? And
the mill will usually be a roaster as well.
Wow, what an interesting setup.
Yeah.
So they'll mill it. So you sell them cherry? Is that how that works? The farms sell them cherry? Then they process it, they mill it, they dry mill it, then they roast it and ship it out.
And a lot of these mills also have tourist operations too. So just off the side of the highway.
They've got a little cartel going on there, don't they?
So you have, you can tour their facilities, you can go into their gift shop, buy a bag of coffee, buy cups of coffee, whatever, all of that. So, so the people who we should be going after are the people who are actually blending the coffee, whether that's a roaster or a mill or whomever it is. But another thing that we need to understand about Hawaii is that it's a small community. So I think a lot of it is that the image is that we're going after the big guy who's making all the money, who's taking advantage of the little guy, the small farmer, versus the small farmer going after their neighbor farm. Or
that could get tricky, right?
Down the street, the business down the street. And so
is that the farmer saying to the big retailer, we're suing you because you're not doing your due diligence?
Maybe that's the angle. But again, in my opinion,
That's going to blow back on the middle guy again.
Yeah. You're not going after the right person. Because again, you're going after your market. You're going after your customer. And what ends up happening is if you're suing your customer, why is your customer going to keep being your customer? Why are they going to keep buying your coffee? And then why are the consumers who purchase from those places going to seek out your coffee from a different place?
Well, consumers aren't invested enough. Exactly. That they're not
exactly.
No. At the end of the day,
so they're doing their shopping at Costco. They see a 5-pound bag of Kona coffee for whatever price they see it, and they're like, "Great, I'll get that." Or Walmart, same thing. They see a pound of coffee. They're not looking for a store that's selling this specific coffee. They're just at the market buying their groceries, and that's that, and it's there. And so what happened in the 90s, or at least what I was told, what happened in the 90s when this whole thing blew up, basically your consumer confidence completely disappears. People don't trust that brand, your Kona brand.
For good reason. Yeah. It's not the individual roaster, it's Kona. They don't trust Kona coffee. And so what's going to happen with that is people aren't going to want to spend their money on it.
Exactly. And so they don't trust it. And then they also don't find it in those stores anymore. So the price of Kona coffee crashed in the 90s because there was the demand that was created for it by this one large company that was importing Central American coffees and selling it as Kona, blah, blah, blah. They created a demand for Kona coffee, though.
Yep.
Which is an interesting kind of benefit that happened to the Kona coffee industry because of all the terrible shit they were doing. They created this market, they created demand, they created a presence of Kona coffee on the mainland and in other countries. So when that company shut down, they were no longer filling that demand. And then that demand also disappeared because people heard about this and they didn't want to buy it anymore. And so then your price crashed. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. They're like, well, I'm getting told that there's 10% Kona in this, but all this coffee might be coming from El Salvador. And no offense against El Salvadorian coffee, but I'm buying Kona coffee and I'm not getting it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, what I was told is that the price
down. Go
price
ahead.
crashed. And then there was just like producers here didn't really know what to do. Their market just kind of shrunk significantly. And so it has taken time for it to build back up. And now there is this demand for Kona coffee. And again, also, let's not forget about the Asian market in Japan. Japan is the largest market for Kona coffee.
Why don't we get Kona coffee on the main island? Like on the mainland? Like, why don't we get...
because it's expensive.
Oh.
So roasters really have very little incentive to purchase Kona coffee because it's so expensive.
You know, what's interesting about that is this is very telling of what's going to happen if people don't start paying farmers around the world in poorer countries what they deserve, because this is going to end up leading to coffee farms closing down.
Yeah.
And then we're going to have to depend on economies like the Californian coffee farming.
Which is also going to be expensive.
It's going to be paying in American wages.
Yeah.
And look, we've got a situation here where if people think that you're going to just get immigrants to go onto these farms, well, hold your horses, people, because with the DACA situation that we have here, which is the people who have been given they've kind of documented undocumented workers. You know, they've been given documents. They're children of immigrants who came here illegally. They've been given documents that they can be legal, but their parents are still undocumented. And a lot of those were the people who were working in these farms, like in fruit farms here in California. Well, of course, Trump showed up and scared the shit out of everybody who is an undocumented immigrant. And it really hurt the agricultural community because no one was showing up to work. And so if you think that, oh, don't worry, we'll have all these coffee farms and we'll just get undocumented immigrants to work on those farms and we can pay them less. No. No. That's everyone's too scared now.
Yeah. Yeah, California is fascinating too because California produces so much food for the United States, and so much of that labor is undocumented immigrants, and it's been that way for a really long time. And then, I mean, I remember 2 years ago, articles already coming out about people not showing up to work.
Yeah, and avocados were left on trees for most of the season last year. And then so we ended up having a massive dependency on Mexico. So the Mexican farmers and pickers, the Mexican pickers decided this is a great time to strike. So they went on strike. So we couldn't get avocados from California. Mexican, just over the border, 15 minutes over the border, they decided that we need to get some attention to get better pay.
Wages,
So they went on strike as well. And it was like, well, fuck, we can't get avocados anywhere. It was something like $90 a box for avocados.
How many pounds is a box? Do you know?
10 kilos, which is like 20 pounds.
Yeah.
That's crazy. $90 a box. Yeah. So all of it is, we have to start paying attention to the life cycle of this agricultural product that we have something to do with, because, I mean, this lawsuit is going to have, from what I understand, and I guess what people are projecting, this lawsuit is going to either work really well for Kona, or it more likely is going to be quite devastating for the whole situation. Because it's not like Target can't, or Costco or any of these other places can't bring in a different coffee and market that to their people. At the end of the day, people just want coffee.
Exactly.
And if they are delusional in there, I mean, right now it's that thing of, oh, it's Kona coffee, we want to protect our local industry. But let me tell you, if it's to choose between a pound of Kona coffee that costs $15 a pound versus a pound of Starbucks coffee that costs $6 a pound, they're not going to pay the $15. I don't care what anybody says. Nobody's that, well, there are a small proportion of the population that are that brand loyal to go for a $9 gap. It's not going to happen. Not in America. People are too price sensitive.
No. Yeah, definitely. It'll be interesting. I don't know if there's been any sort of like follow up or anything that has progressed at all. Like I said, I haven't had conversations with anybody about this basically since that article came out, except for one person really briefly. And I was just so engrossed in competition stuff. And then when I came back from that, I've been working every day since. So I haven't had time to really talk to anybody about it, but I'm interested to know if anything else has happened, if other people in our community have responded to the folks who are going ahead with this, and if what those conversations have been and what they're like and stuff. So yeah, I need to get a little cued into it a little bit more to see what's going on.
Do you know what kind of damages they're seeking? Is it money that they want? Is it like, I couldn't quite understand that from the article.
I don't know. I wonder, part of me also wonders if it's a big
publicity stunt?
Yeah. Maybe not even a stunt, but a goal of something to get more publicity.
Okay.
Which also definitely this conversation needs to be happening more of, hey, there's this fake Kona coffee out there and people are making a lot of money off of it. But how do we address that properly? And how do we fix it, or how do we stop it from happening? How do you also make sure that consumers are understanding what it means when they're buying a blend, a Kona blend. If those roasters are not being transparent about what else is going in that coffee, and they're not. They're just saying it's a 10% Kona blend or it's a 20% Kona blend, and that's it. And
Yeah,
so
wow.
they're not telling you anything else about it.
I've got to get you to connect me with the people in your
Yeah,
local community that are more in the know about it. I'd really love to have a round table on this podcast
yeah,
about it so that more
yeah.
people can understand what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it's indicative of the greater agricultural problem that we're experiencing around coffee, and in particular specialty coffee. What
Mm-hmm.
kinds of scores do Kona coffees get?
So we actually do a cupping competition every year. And last year's, I want to say the winner was an 87.
Mm-hmm.
Don't quote me exactly on that. It was high 80s. And this is also another discussion or conversation I have kind of with some of my inner circle colleagues and stuff is our bias of Kona coffee not being great. Because this is definitely like the general feeling within specialty coffee that Kona coffee is just kind of okay coffee.
Okay.
So during one of the cupping competitions last year, we actually did a calibration exercise and we cupped some coffees together, scored them, talked about our scores, and we all scored this coffee or these couple of coffees, I think in the mid to high 80s.
Mm-hmm.
These were Cup of Excellence coffees from Panama that
Okay.
scored in the mid to high 90s. And we were scoring them into mid to high 80s.
Oh,
And so it's like,
okay.
what is that innate bias that we're having? Because are we assuming that those are all Hawaii coffees on the table? And so are we being too harsh on Hawaii coffees as cuppers? Or are we doing a disservice? And is that doing a disservice? And it is doing a disservice
Absolutely.
to
Yeah.
Hawaii coffees. Because when you publish those scores, again, roasters don't have an incentive to pay high prices for Kona coffee, especially if they see, well, this one scored an 87. I can get a, coffee from, I'm just gonna say El Salvador again, El Salvador that scored 92 and it is a quarter of the price.
Right.
I should probably just go for the El Salvador one.
I'll connect you with someone if you like that will score it very fairly.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it might be worth you sending like a typical 87
Mm-hmm.
without telling this person what it's scored and just send them and say,
Mm-hmm.
can you score this coffee? This person's
Yeah.
really good at that. I
Yeah.
mean, there's lots of people that we can do that for.
Yeah.
But this person I really trust.
Cool. Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah.
But also we used to send, this is also kind of a crazy thing, we used to send all of our coffees to the mainland to get cupped and scored by a different group of cuppers who we
Oh,
never
okay. So
knew, we
you were
never
already
saw
doing it.
doing that. And again, though, they all know their Hawaii coffees, they all know their
Okay.
whatever. And so there is there that bias across the board for Hawaii grown coffees not being great? And then back then, the thing was that we would receive scores back. You would get a printout, kind of a little graphic of showing different qualities in those coffees. But there was no conversation between the producers and the people scoring those coffees of like, how can we make this better?
Mm.
Why did it get this score? Why were you tasting this defect? Or why were you tasting this quality in it, et cetera? And how can we change that? And so last year, I'm pretty sure last year was the first year that it was done in Hawaii with Q Gators from Hawaii. And at least the first year in a really long time. And the goal there, and we're doing it again this year, I believe, the goal there is to be able to open up that conversation between the producers and the cuppers of like, let's talk about these scores and let's talk about how we can improve them, how we can avoid having ferment defects or molds or whatever in your coffees. And that's, I know, the goal for a lot of us here is to create some better communication so that producers understand why they're getting these scores. Because if they get a score that just says 82, what does that mean to them? And they're being told, oh, that's specialty coffee. But this other coffee scored 86 or 87, but they're not being told why or how.
Okay. So are they not Q graders? Are they not trained as Q graders, these farmers?
No.
I've always been fascinated by that. Like the fact that you're growing the product and not being trained in what would get you a better price for that product. Like you grow a banana, you taste a banana. If it doesn't taste like a banana, nobody's going to buy that banana, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you expect that coffee farmers, and I know nothing about this, let me preface that by saying I'm not talking shit about anyone. I'm just curious as to why people who are creating this agricultural product aren't given insight into what we want it to taste like, or how it could taste better so that we can pay more money for it.
Mm-hmm. Access. Having access to that information. Maybe not being a certified Q grader. First of all, financially, it's expensive.
Yeah.
A lot of farmers are going to be like, why am I going to spend $1,800 to take a course to learn about how to taste coffee? And a lot of producers are going to be like, I already know how to taste coffee. I taste my coffee every day,
Yeah.
And so there's that. And this isn't to say that they're not cupping their coffee, but for them, they're like, okay, it's tasting good. It's tasting how I want it to taste.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, not really having a conversation about, is this what other people want? The other thing in Hawaii and in Kona is that we have this, it sells. Kona coffee sells out every year.
Does it really?
It's difficult. Like right now, it's difficult to get Kona coffee because there's not very much left. And what is left is just like your standard, like good, it's fine coffee.
Is there a separation between like a standard kind of Kona coffee, like a commodity version of it, and a specialty version of it?
There isn't a defined difference, but so what historically has been Kona coffee is a washed Typica coffee, and that's it. So and the reason why it's Typica is just because that's what came to Hawaii and did better than the other stuff that came to Hawaii. And so washed Typica coffee is kind of what you get most of the time when you buy a Kona coffee. And then there are people who are growing other stuff. And usually the people who are growing other stuff are the same people who are being a little bit more innovative, who might be taking some more risks in processing, in seeing if that variety does well or it does not do well. So there isn't a defined line, but there's like, this is what most Kona coffee is, and this is what some of the other stuff is. Mm-hmm. And that other stuff is, over the last few years, that's what's been winning our competitions.
Tell me, first of all, is it all Arabica, or is there Arabica and Robusta?
It's all Arabica. I don't know anybody who's producing Robusta. They might have a random tree on their farm that they're like, this is the Robusta tree. Yeah. But nobody's producing Robusta. It's all Arabica. Yeah.
And are you guys in contact with World of Coffee? No, sorry, World Coffee Research?
I think so. So I met with the geneticist Shifumi Nagai, who did the crossbreed of this coffee, and I started talking to her about coffee breeding, and I brought up World Coffee Research, and she kind of just gave me this smile of like, we'll have to talk about World Coffee Research later. Okay. And like, so I think that she might be kind of working with them, but I don't know in what capacity, and I don't really know if anybody else is.
Yeah. Look, if you guys aren't connected with them and there's only one
Yeah.
person that's connected with them, we had Greg Minahan on the podcast, and
Mm-hmm.
they're really trying to do some amazing stuff with
Yeah.
different varietals and putting in the research to figure out what are the best varietals to grow in certain climates, and particularly as microclimates are shifting with climate change. They're committed to building up a seed bank, and they're committed to helping people understand what are the best coffees to grow in their regions. And that might help.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. When I listened to that episode, I was like, this is fascinating. And I want to do this in Hawaii because we have a lot of resources available here too. And it's kind of it would be a very easy place to do research.
And that marriage between, not just growing what's been done before, but being very deliberate about what you're planting there and why, and actually aiming to create a specialty version of what's going on. Let me tell you, like, if people are prepared to pay ridiculous amounts of money for 90 plus coffees, people are going to pay ridiculous amounts for Kona coffee on the mainland. We would do it for Elixir. If we could find a market for it, we could sell that elixir in Japan. We could sell it even here. It's something to think about. It's a way to kind of create a whole new kind of subculture around there. If it's something that.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of us in Hawaii right now are trying to figure out how do we, tap into the mainland market more, because how do we show people that Hawaii coffee is interesting and it's delicious, and also, you're paying a lot more for it, but you're paying more for it because it's produced in the United States and these people are making a fair wage in the United States versus, whatever it is.
Slavery in Rwanda.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So nobody is being, like, the pickers aren't being screwed over in their wages, and if they are, they get in trouble. There was another issue that happened at some farm, I can't remember, several years ago, about not paying their farm workers proper wages.
Yeah,
and
wow.
so you get caught and you get in trouble. And so here, that these people are making what they should be making.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the last thing I wanted to talk to you about, because we could talk for pretty much about 16 hours and still not run out of shit to talk about, you and I. And like, full disclosure, this is the first real conversation you and I have had long format. This is not
this is true.
Yeah. You are up for election for SCA the US chapter. Has voting closed for that yet?
It closes on Friday. Friday is the last day to vote.
So tell me why you want to do this.
Yeah. This has kind of been my, I guess, like, the theme throughout even my whole competition season was I was the only person at Nationals from Hawaii, the only person in the Brewers Cup using a Hawaii coffee. There was somebody in the barista comp who did use a Hawaii coffee, which was awesome. I was excited to see somebody else using that. But we very often are left out of the conversation. We're forgotten a lot in the conversations that happen in the coffee industry. And as a part of the United States and as the producing region of the United States, we should be involved.
Absolutely.
We should have a voice. We should know what's going on. There are a lot of people here who, like, don't even really know what SCA is.
Wow.
There are people here who are like, why should I be a member of SCA? What do they do with us that involves us? And it's like, those are valid questions.
Fuck yes.
Yeah.
I asked those questions. Are you serious? I'm trying to still figure out what the fuck SCA is doing. If anyone from SCA, Peter Giuliano, we might have him on the podcast in the next few weeks.
Nice. Cool.
I can't wait to have him on to ask him these questions.
Yeah. Like how is it benefiting its members, other than getting a discount at events? And so, yeah.
If any, you couldn't hear me roll my eyes, but I rolled my eyes because it's absolutely true. Like, I'm trying to understand the benefit to other than discounts. Like, I get that they're sponsoring research. I get all of this stuff, but don't get me started. You can do these things, but what's the quality of the research? What's the intention? Who is the end benefactor of all of this? Anyway.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of there's lack of communication. There's lack of representation for Hawaii in the coffee industry in the United States in general. And for me, I was like, it's important for us to be involved. And I think it'd be fascinating to have an insight as well as to like what's going on in SCA so that I can also share that with my community. And it's just time for Hawaii to get some more recognition for all of the work that people are doing here, for the quality that is being produced here, and for not even just on the producer side, but the roasters that are here right now and baristas who are here. I mean, I am really excited for this next year to see some other baristas from Hawaii go to nationals next year. I want to see other people.
That's going to happen?
We're going to host another prelim.
Awesome.
Yeah, and we want to get more people out there, and
gosh, maybe I should time a trip to Hawaii around that time. I'd love to come to that.
Yeah. Well, and for me, it was like me being able to get the foot in the door to see what the heck it is all about. And now what I want to do is just communicate that with the other baristas here. Like, this is what my experience was. This is what I did well. This is what I did wrong. This is what I should have thought about more or whatever. But I just want to get some more people motivated to be more involved and also have more people on the mainland motivated to invite us into that conversation more. So I want to be part of the US chapter to do that, to bring Hawaii to that national conversation more.
I love that.
And it's just time. It's just time. And there's,
if there's any way that I can help, oh yeah. And if there's any way that I can help with that, I can't imagine how, but if there's ever a way that this podcast can be a part of that conversation and help you do that, you will reach out, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, great.
Thank you. And I appreciate that.
It's my pleasure. It's something that we can't be sitting here as an industry saying, we got to help the farmers over in Guatemala and El Salvador and Rwanda and all of these places, Burundi, but the farmers in the country that we're living in, well, fuck them, they'll figure it out for themselves. No. And the baristas, they'll figure it out for themselves. No.
Yeah.
That's not okay.
Yeah.
That's not okay. Well, lady, we just did over 2 hours.
Yeah, I can't believe that. I just looked at the time. I was like, holy shit, it's actually been 2 hours. Okay.
I got to tell you, like, everyone who comes on is like, like, I asked them how long they got time to talk for, and they're like, oh, we won't talk for more than an hour. Will we? Like, what could we possibly talk for an hour about? And I'm like, I tell you what, it's going to fly.
Yeah, it does. It totally does.
I have the luxury of having conversation with good people, and it's just, you get sucked into it.
Yeah. Great. And thank you for having me. Thank you for all the questions too, and all the people who you have on here. It's been a fantastic thing to learn from. It's fascinating.
That makes my heart so happy. For me, I think it's quite selfish because I have this podcast as a way to be able to learn the shit that I'm interested in about coffee firsthand. And I don't mind admitting what I don't know. But to see so many people getting joy out of it and learning and using me as a scapegoat to ask all the stupid questions, which I have no problem with. So yeah, thanks for being a supporter of this podcast, and thanks for being such an advocate in your own community and stepping up and saying, look, I'll go figure it out. I'll go put myself up for the US chapter. I'll do it. We need people to do stuff like that. Like, I'm not the biggest fan or hater of SCA in any way. Like, I'm kind of meh about it because I don't quite understand what the fuck they do. But you're saying, well, I don't understand either, so I'm going to go get involved and see what this means. And we need more people like you in the industry, lady.
Yeah, and if you want to change it, I guess you kind of got to be involved in it too, hey? So
that's why I started this podcast.
Yeah.
That's absolutely. So thank you.
Thank you.
Come back again.
I'd love to.
I can't wait to see what happens in your career. I think that you are absolutely one of the rising stars to look out for, and it's why I wanted to have you on the podcast. Because not enough people are taking notice of people in Hawaii, and I think that unless we put people like you front and center, you're not someone who's like, oh, let me take a selfie, take a look at me. You're never going to do that. Absolutely.
Oh my God.
So I can put you front and center when you're not putting you front and center. I like doing that.
Oh my gosh. Well, recently I've posted a lot of photos of myself like on Instagram because of competition stuff. I'm like, I hate this. Don't.
My favorite part of not having of not being in the music business anymore is that I don't have to do that anymore. I don't have to do photo shoots and get photos of myself up there and all that kind of stuff. You rarely see a photo. I don't think I post a photo of me ever in the last 2 years. It's awesome. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Fun times. Awesome. All right, lady, you have an amazing rest of your day.
You as well. Thank you.
Bye,
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.